Exciter from Ottawa, Canada, was formed in May of 1979 by guitarist John Ricci, who had just broken up with his band Hellraiser. With the intention of continuing as Hellraiser, John would recruit bassist Alan Johnson and drummer Dan Beeler on both percussion and vocals, but they would change their name to Exciter in 1980, inspired by the Judas Priest song. This lineup would record a demo in 1982, which got the attention of Mike Varney at Shrapnel Records, who offered Exciter a spot on the US Metal Volume 2 compilation with the track World War III. After this, Exciter recorded another demo and sent it out to labels in hopes of getting interest for a record deal. They also sent a copy to Mike Varney, who liked it so much that he mastered the demo and released it as Exciter's first album in 1983, Heavy Metal Maniac.
We couldn't get a Canadian record deal for our first album. So, we were forced to go to the States. And, a company in California picked us up. And as a result, it was on Importing Canada. Our music does, it doesn't sound Canadian, if you know what I mean. It sounds more British. We pattern ourselves after British-style heavy metal. So I guess, kids pick it up. Hey, it's an import. It sounds British. They must be from England. They're not from here,
And there is definitely a British feel to a lot of the music, which cranks up the tempo and adds in a punkish energy to deliver some excellent early speed metal tracks, like Stand Up and Fight, Under Attack, and the title track. Plus, the frenetic breakneck solos from John Ricci add just the right amount of sonic intensity. But while this is a speedy album, it's not all blistering riffs, like on the heavier, darker track, Iron Dogs. There are a lot of European and new wave of British heavy metal vibes on here, but more than anything, I get a lot of early Iron Maiden, with a few moments that feel pretty clearly inspired by their first two albums, like on the slower, more emotional entry, Black Witch for example, with a very Remember Tomorrow inspired opening.
Wants to mess with my brain. brain. Darkness and sorcery till I die. Stop what you're doing. I'm just a man, don't believe in your powers, woman.
Also, Dan Beehler's wild, aggressive vocals have a sort of Paul Di'Anno-like delivery at times, but with more shrieks and screams. And Alan Johnson's bass tone, if not his playing style, reminds me a lot of Steve Harris. But even with these elements worked in, Exciters still have their own sound on here, often pushing into a speedier metal style that was just about to break into the American music scene, while also including some more straightforward, traditional sounding stuff too. The following year, Exciter signed with Megaforce Records to release their second album, Violence and Force, which, after an opening instrumental, kicks off with the very Motorhead-sounding title track. This one is mostly along the same lines as Heavy Metal Maniac, although Violence and Force is a bit more polished and it also slows things down slightly. There's still a speedy quality to many of the songs here, but overall it feels more like up-tempo power metal than outright speed metal.
There's a form of music very popular, of heavy metal music, very popular in Europe and England at the moment, which we call thrash metal or speed metal.
Right.
Are you a fan of that particular kind of music?
Not particularly, no. None of the guys in the band are really. When we started Exciter, we went to a certain speed, and if you listen to our first album, which is really our fastest album, we don't go any faster than say, Motorhead or Fast Judas Priest or Fast Iron Maiden.
Right.
We've never really went over the top. Like Metallica did with their first album,
So
they took it to the extreme, and a lot of bands came up after Metallica and took this thrash thing, and we kind of got thrown into that.
But you wouldn't place yourself in that category, is it?
We consider ourselves more of like a power metal band, a straightforward heavy metal band. We haven't forgotten the roots of real metal, where you go out and play super heavy as well as fast, and not just 10 million miles an hour, you know?
Good to hear.
So along with faster tracks like Scream in the Night, Destructor, and Saxons of the Fire, we also get stuff like pounding metal, with a more traditional feel and a heavy, primitive riff. And there's also Delivering to the Master, which is arguably even heavier with a slow, brutal Black Sabbath vibe.
Yeah, we're very, very influenced by Black Sabbath as well. The three members of the band, if anyone asked us, who's your favorite band, the three of us would automatically say Black Sabbath, okay? Now, we love the heaviness of Black Sabbath, and yet we love the speed of Motorhead and the speed of fast Judas Priest and Saxon.
I also feel compelled to remark on the pretty terrible cover, which shows a lady holding a door closed while some kind of zombie tries to break in. And that's all well and good, but what I can't figure out is what's going on with that switchblade. I mean, how is he even physically holding it? It's impossible to tell, but fortunately it has no impact on the kick-ass music contained within. Apparently, Exciter and Megaforce were having issues, so after Violence and Force, their contract would end up getting sold to Music for Nations, a UK label that would put out Exciter's third album, Long Live the Loud, in 1985. Long Live the Loud is my favorite Exciter album, with a fantastic variety of crushing metal tracks and outstanding performances from all three members. It's not a major departure from the band's first two releases, but it feels a little more mature and a little more melodic overall, with multiple standout tracks. There is a pretty strong Motorhead vibe running through Long Live the Loud, but it's still distinctively Exciter. You could argue that it's a bit softer maybe compared to their first two albums, but even so, Exciter doesn't let up on the speed, and the powerful energy is infectious. Plus, it's nice to see the band stretching their songwriting skills a bit further. And John Ricci continues to kill it with arguably some of his best Exciter solos. Dan Beehler continues to be impressive on vocals as well, somehow maintaining that high-pitched shriek while simultaneously punishing the drums into oblivion. The 10-minute epic Wake Up Screaming closes the album with one of his most powerful choruses. They also went for a much more epic-looking album cover this time, with the Conan the Barbarian or Elric of Melniboné fantasy thing going on, complete with a naked lady kneeling in front of the warrior guy, although she's got a ridiculously long arm and her hand just kinda disappears into his armor. But still, it's definitely an improvement over the Violence and Force cover. While the band seemed to be gaining traction in the metal scene, Dan and John unfortunately weren't getting along. At the end of 1985, they'd managed to get out the Feel the Knife EP, which is really more of a 3-track single than an EP. But after that, John would leave the band. To replace him, Dan and Alan would bring on a guitarist they'd played with before joining Hellraiser, Brian McPhee. His first appearance would be on the 4th Exciter album, Unveiling the Wicked.
Can you give me 3 quick reasons why I should persuade the people out there they ought to buy it?
3 quick reasons?
Absolutely, quick.
Because it's one of the heaviest albums you're gonna get. It's melodic heavy metal, and because I'm broke and I could use the money. No, we feel it's our best album. We feel it's definitely, for your money, you're not gonna get a heavier album.
Apparently, some fans had felt Long Live the Loud was a bit soft, and this was the band's attempt at going back to a heavier sound. But it also has more of a commercial angle too, which, along with Brian McPhee's guitar playing, serves up an obviously different feel than previous Exciter albums. Although, I do really like Brian's guitar playing, which is more melodic in general than John Ricci's. This is the first Exciter album to have tracks that are just kinda okay for me. Like Living Evil is a bit forgettable, but there's also some pretty rockin' stuff on here too, like Waiting in the Dark.
Me and Brian wrote that album in a week, and I'm really proud of it. I love the album. I think we lost a lot of fans because of it, but I think maybe we gained some other fans too. It took me a lot of years to really warm up to it because I sort of blamed it for our downfall. And but we were just left back in Canada and forgotten about, and we couldn't really do anything. We didn't really have good management or anything, so we just sat there and rotted.
Things would kind of fall apart after this, with Exciter moving over to a small Canadian label called Maze Music, where they recorded a version of their new album with Dan Beehler on vocals as usual. But at the urging of their new label, they'd end up bringing on singer Rob Malnati to re-record the vocals. And for the first time, Exciter would appear as a 4-piece on their self-titled 1988 album. To be fair, I don't think this is absolutely terrible, but everything about it just feels kinda generic, including both the music and Rob's voice, which doesn't have the power or charisma of Dan's. That said, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nodding along to some of the tracks on here, and I still liked Brian McPhee's solos, but even the stuff I liked was quickly forgotten once it was over.
Stupid things to bring in a singer. I don't know what the fuck we were thinking about then. The songs were just, I don't know, it wasn't Exciter. It should have been a heavier Unveiling the Wicked, which it wasn't. And I think we just lost our fan base. Got in big fights, and then I just left the band because it was just a joke at that point.
However, Exciter would reform in 1991 with both Dan Beehler and John Ricci returning. After several attempts, they weren't able to convince Alan to come back, so they'd instead bring on bassist David Ledden, who'd played in a band called Crypt with Rob Malnati. This new lineup would put out Kill After Kill in 1992 on Noise Records. I see a lot of negative reviews about this one, but I actually liked it more than I expected. It's way better than the self-titled album and feels a lot more like early Exciter, with a heavier sound and a return to some speedier riffs. Plus, we finally get an Exciter music video out of it. It goes without saying that having Dan back in the vocalist role again is a major plus too. His voice just fits the music and captures the wild energy of the band, even if this album doesn't quite reach the heights of their earlier material. Along with the mostly straightforward up-tempo metal stuff, Exciter also toss in a little more Sabbath worship in Shadow of the Cross. But regardless of song quality, Kill After Kill was still going to struggle to get any attention, being released right in the middle of the grunge explosion.
At that point, grunge was coming in hard. John and I were playing 2 original members and nobody was coming to our shows. Record company just left us high and dry, and still to this day never saw a penny from Kill After Kill. And in 1993 I just had it with everybody in the business and I walked.
Exciter did release a live album in 1993 from a show recorded in 1991, which featured Jeff McDonald on bass as well as Dan and John. But after this, Exciter would officially break up. However, a new version would form in 1996 with lone original member John Ricci on guitar. He'd bring with him vocalist Jacques Bellinger, along with bassist Mark Sharon and drummer Rick Sharon, who are somehow not related. This lineup of Exciter would put out The Dark Command in 1997.
In the still of the night, innocence prevail without a guide. Women and children are first to run. Escape the madman, tell till he's done. Till he's done. Dark. Dark.
Released on a label called Osmos Productions, The Dark Command is a solid enough album, although it helped for me to think of it as almost an entirely different band, since Dan Beehler's vocals and drumming had been so integral to Exciter's sound. This version is a darker, more modern approach and leans a bit more into the thrash side, but still delivers some good, heavy stuff.
Burn! Burn! At the stake! Pain! Pain! Until you break! 16th century songs, born without sin!
It's a mixture of the old and the new style, like the same energy and spirit of the old Exciter is still in the new music, the new album, The Dark Command. But because the vocals are a little bit different from the original singer, it adds a fresh angle, and that it sounds more 90s, but old style.
Yeah.
You know, you can definitely tell that the band was originating in the 80s because of Exciter's original unique style. But the way that Jacques sings, it gives it a new twist of 90s flavoring. But the music is the intensity of the 80s.
Obviously, Jacques brings a new flavor to Exciter, going from a deep, gravelly growl to a high-pitched scream that works well with the darker sound. So I do think The Dark Command is decent, but overall, not much of it really stuck with me after listening. I actually enjoyed 2000's Blood of Tyrants quite a bit more, despite yet another awful album cover.
Never say die and come alive. The sonic wonder of crushing irons. Legion of strength and up and down. Force all the modern man. That's the Crusaders. The force all the modern man. That's the Crusaders.
The production does feel a bit weak, and the musical direction is largely the same as on The Dark Command, but the songs just stood out more to me on this one, with more memorable riffs.
During the violence is on the siege. Battles world of darkness matter.
This one really captures the dark, brutally exciting energy that the Dark Command seemed to be going for. And for me, everything with this version of Exciter really gels here, including Jacques' over-the-top vocals.
Be strong and brave, a time and peace. Brutal warning. Brutal warning. Brutal warning.
Although, ultimately, a lot of the appeal of these two main Osmos albums is still John Ricci's guitar playing, including the mid-album instrumental, War Cry. Things would kind of start to break down again for Exciter after this, with Jacques leaving in 2001 and Mark Sharon leaving in 2002. They'd bring on new bassist Paul Champagne and vocalist Rob DeGroot in 2003. But after only a few months, Jacques would return. Paul would also be let go before recording a new album though, and on 2004's New Testament, John would handle both guitar and bass.
Unholy children of disgrace. I've seen them steal away the lifeblood from the rail, and now it crossed down on the side. This is the rising of the dead. This is the dying of the prisoner of hell. This is the rising of the dead. Witches and love capture spell of hell.
New Testament is one of those albums where the new version of the band records more well-known classic material by the old version of the band, and it sounds pretty much how you'd expect. It's decent enough, but I'm always more into the original recordings. Later in 2004, Exciter would bring on bassist Rob Cohen, and when Jacques left for good in 2006, he'd be replaced by vocalist Kenny Winter. After a couple of delays, this lineup of Exciter would finally release Thrash, Speed, Burn on Massacre Records in 2008. Thrash, Speed, Burn is more speed than thrash and overall pretty straightforward stuff. Although I do think Kenny is a great fit for the group with a powerful voice and scream. Musically, it's got moments of coolness and some head-banging riffs throughout, but the rough production isn't doing anyone any favors, and a lot of the songs do start to sound a bit similar. But still, I thought tracks like Evil Omen and Betrayal added some dark variety.
Master, it's
And as usual, they also get in a slower, more Black Sabbath-leaning track with Crucifixion.
From the flames, strength and power from the grave. Shout, let's win! Defend the right's infernal reign.
I will admit this one took a few listens for me to start to appreciate, but ultimately I think there's enough good stuff that it's worth giving a chance. In 2010, this same lineup of Exciter would put out the band's most recent album, Death Machine, still on Massacre Records.
Suffering pain and to be healthy minds. Infected violence, it's conquer will die. Death machine. Death machine. Death machine.
This one is a more aggressive album than Thrash, Speed, Burn, with Kenny getting even screamier and growlier, adding to the head-pounding brutality of the music. Personally, I prefer Thrash, Speed, Burn between the two. There's even less variation here song-wise, and while I think Kenny may be my favorite Exciter singer after Dan Beehler, there's not much else about this album that really stayed with me after listening. As with most lineups of Exciter, this one would fall apart as well in 2014, with the band posting on their Facebook page that John, the only original member, had left. But John responded claiming that wasn't true, and would instead get back together with Dan Beehler and Alan Johnson. However, Dan and John continued to not get along, and in 2018, John would be replaced by guitarist Daniel Decay.
I've known Daniel forever. I know his family. I know his dad. He knows my daughter. Saw his bands around town when he was younger and stuff. And when he heard there was an opening, he called me up from Toronto, and that was it. So we never tried anyone out. We never. A whole bunch of people sent stuff in, and thank you very much. But we never had to go to the list. It just, as soon as he got a hold of us, me and Al just went, he's the guy.
This lineup of Exciter has yet to release any new material, partly because of being set back by the pandemic, and partly because of their live touring commitments. However, the plan is to release a new album eventually, and I'm excited to see what Exciter does next. For your homework, you'll want to be sure to check out Heavy Metal Maniac from 1983, Violence and Force from 1984, Long Live the Loud from 1985, and Unveiling the Wicked from 1986. From there, I'd go with Kill After Kill from 1992, Blood of Tyrants from 2000 and Thrash Speed Burn from 2008. I hope you enjoyed this look back at Exciter, a Canadian heavy metal band that was perhaps more of an influence on speed metal than an actual speed metal band themselves. However, their 80s material is all pretty great, and it's a shame that so many label changes and internal issues kept them from achieving more success. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Thank you.